Hi, peeps. Are you ready to sew your very own Peep bunny? I hope so. Let's get started with everything that is in your kit. You have your pattern, some Polyfill for the stuffing, 2 pieces of purple felt, a scrap of brown felt, a strip of purple fleece felt, and then you have some purple thread and some brown thread. You're going to need a sewing needle. So you can either trace onto the purple fleece or you can adhere it and then cut around the template. So now let's focus on the eyes and the nose. I used a pin to poke through the eyes, but I want to leave a mark. So I actually use a ultra fine Sharpie to poke right through those holes. It'll leave a really small, tiny mark. And you do not have to sew on the eyes and the nose. You can just use a Sharpie. You can glue the little tiny circles on. They're very small, so it is probably the trickiest part of this project. So making those marks helps center the dots right where I want them for it to look as close to a peep as possible. I knotted the thread and I'm going to come up from the back side and I'm just going to make one little stitch. That's all it needs to keep the eye on. But you can also do a complete stitch all the way around. I wish I had used a contrasting thread so you could see it here. What I did with this one, I didn't cut the thread. I'm just going back a little over and then pulling up through the center of the eye. And then I go down on the outside edge of the eye. And I did that all the way around the circumference. So in a way, I guess it could look like sunbeams coming from the sun, but it's invisible because of the color of the thread. And then you will do the exact same thing for the nose, however you want to do it, even if it's just gluing, whatever's best for you. Okay, so now the face is done. We're going to sew our strip to one of the pieces. It could be the back piece, it could be the front piece with the face. I chose to use the back piece. You'll use purple thread, but I used white thread so that you can see the difference and you can see my stitches. They won't be perfect. Yours will be much better than mine, I'm positive. There's going to be many curves. Obviously, the whole thing is just curves. So the strip is what you're going to maneuver and manipulate as you sew it on to the body pieces. This is the tail piece of the strip. Don't start at the very edge, like the very end of it, because you want to have some space and you're going to sew it to the other end of the strip. And I'm just doing a whip stitch all the way around because it's the quickest stitch for me. A blanket stitch would look really great for this project as well. Your threads will probably be pretty close to invisible, so even if they're not perfect, no one's probably going to notice. You'll totally see with my sample all of the flaws, but that's okay. When you go around the curves, this is the first curve, you just manipulate that strip a little bit. There will be some tiny tucks and maybe some gathers. Those will be smoothed out with all of the stuffing, so don't worry if it comes out too wonky or crooked. So I have the strips sewn all the way around with a bit of a tail left over. I hope that you start at the bottom as well. That will be the best place to stuff the bunny with. And then now I'm going to try to line up my opposite piece. The curves should line up as best as they can. There'll still be some shifting, but as long as you have it in the general place, like the tips of the ears lined up, it should work out okay. It's going to be a little bit harder to manipulate the strip now that the strip is already anchored to another piece, but you can still make some manipulations with the thread and that stuffing. Again, it will really smooth out any tucks or gathers. And so here's the opening. This is where the two ends of the tail will be sewn together, and the opening will be left because it's a seam for the stuffing to be able to go into it. Just don't close the seam yet. Only focus on connecting the two ends of the strips together. And that should be a really quick sew. And then you'll have the hole, and we're going to stuff with the polyfill. And so there's the hole. Start off with a small amounts of the polyfill. We want to get it all the way up to the top of the ears, that's where you can use a pencil, chopstick, or the skewer. Make sure that when you are stuffing up through the ears, that you just push it very gently. You could easily poke right through the seams that you sewed, and we don't want to undo the work that we just did. So the ears are a little tight and it's going to be a little tricky. That will be the longest. Now that it is all stuffed, as much as I like it anyways, it doesn't have to be completely full. You're just going to sew that back opening and you'll have a completed seam and you will be done. So I finished the seam and I tied a knot at the end of the thread, and I'm going to hide it in the bunny by stitching one, pulling the needle through it and pulling really tight and trimming that thread. And all done. And I hope that you really enjoyed this little project and your bunny came out super cute. Email me your finished results. I would love to see your peep. Thanks, everyone.